Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedyadravitam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vishvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we're continuing through our 6th chapter, and what Vidyaranya is doing is refuting the ideas of some of the major schools of his day, including Buddhism. And many of those ideas are not known by the same name today, but they are certainly ideas that people have. So where did we leave off?
We're on number 86.
Tasmadatma mahaneva naivanurnapi madhyamah akashavat sarvagato niransha shruti sanmatah. So the Atman is neither atomic nor of medium size, but is infinite, partless, and like Akasha, all-pervasive. This view accords with the Shruti.
So, again, the idea of the Atman being something extremely tiny and subtle that pervades our veins as if it were something material, or the Atman being like a ghost that pervades the physical body. He has refuted those, and he again says, no, it is like Akasha. And I love the term that Yoga Vasishta uses so frequently, Chidakasha, the space of consciousness itself. So the self is not in you. Your body, mind, intellect is in the self. And again, this becomes easy to understand if we go to the dream state. In the dream state, first is personal ignorance, the avarana shakti, the veiling power of deep sleep, then the vikshepa shakti of the dream state, and you get a dream body. And there's a dream ego. I think I'm inside the body, peeping out. And there's a dream world outside and dream thoughts and feelings inside. But I am not in the dream. The dream is in me. And then as Krishna says, I am not in them, they are in me. And then later on he says, and they're not even really in me. Meaning if I dream about a horse, I don't wake up in the morning with the horse in bed with me. It wasn't really there, it was imagination. Next verse.
इत्युक्त्वा तद्विशेषे तु बहुधा कलहं ययुः अचिद्रूपोऽथ चिद्रूप चिदरूप इत्यपि. Thus, about the nature of the Atman, there are many differences of opinion, whether it is unconscious, conscious, or a compound of the two.
So now is the self conscious or unconscious? Well, it depends on what we mean by conscious. So there's one way of looking at consciousness. There are states of consciousness. Oh, I'm in the waking state, and then I went to Burning Man and I took ecstasy, and I was in another state of consciousness. I went to sleep last night. What was my state of consciousness? Nothing. Now, again, Sanskrit is much clearer in its words. We have chit, which is the word for pure awareness, the ground of being. We describe the self as Sat, Chit, Ananda. But then we have two other words, Chitta, the stuff of mind, out of which mind states are created. Sometimes also we have the word Chaitanya, which can mean a state of mind, a state of consciousness. So, the mind can be conscious or unconscious from that standpoint, not the self. The self is always the illuminator. Are you conscious of your waking state reality right now? Yes. Did you sleep well last night? Yes, I did. If you know you slept well last night, you must have been conscious of unconsciousness, if we want to think of that as a mind state. Worldly parallel. Can you see the objects in the room? Yes. If you close your eyes, can you see the objects of the room? No. Do you see that you cannot see? What do you see? There's nothing there. Everything's black. But you are not blind. You open your eyes, you see the things in the room. It's like the waking state. You close your eyes and you see nothing because the back of your eyelids are obscuring everything. That is like deep sleep or anesthetic. Any thoughts on this? We can get all caught up because English falls short. Words like awareness and consciousness. You can get very confused because different teachers, especially if they're speaking in a non-English tongue, I'm thinking of Nisargadatta Maharaj. He will essentially use the word consciousness for what we would call chitta, mind stuff. He actually is using the word chaitanya, but he'll use chit for awareness, the ground of being. All right, next verse.
प्राभाकरास्तार्किकाश्च प्राहुरस्यादिचिदात्मताम् आकाशवदद्रव्यात्मा शब्दवत्त गुणश्चतिः. The followers of Prabhakara and the logicians state that Atman is by nature unconscious. It is a substance like Akasha, and consciousness is its attribute, as sound is an attribute of Akasha.
Yes. So this is just people messing with words. So these logicians will say the self is inherently unconscious. It does not know anything. Vedanta says it is not in its pure state when the thoughting stops, the vimarsha, the deliberations of the mind. It is not aware of anything, but it's true. But the self itself is always knowing itself. It is self-evident. That is not the thought. Oh, I exist. That's just a thought. It is not inert. If we go back to Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, I think this 16th verse. Na sato vidyate bhavaha, that one, where Krishna plays with these two words, sat and bhava. Only being, bhava, really exists. Non-world is inert. It is jada. And the self is always conscious, always shining as prakash, the light of pure awareness. My suggestion, don't get caught up in this kinds of wordplay stuff. It doesn't solve anything. Go to your direct experience. Who are you? What are you? What is your essential nature? Slow down the mind. Renounce all attachments and identifications and see what remains. Next verse.
Ichha dvesha prayatnascha dharma dharma sukha sukhe tatsang sagaskarascha tasyaite gunaschi tivadiritaha. They state that not only consciousness, but also desire, aversion, effort, virtue, vice, pleasure, and pain, and also the impressions are the attributes of the Atma.
So, there are some people who confuse the Atman with the transmigrating soul, with the Sukshma Sharira, and they attribute qualities of mind to the self, the quality of will. Christians do this. Christians say your soul has a faculty of will. And here, desire, etc. And the scriptures in the language of poetry will say things like the infinite desired to manifest the world. That's mystic symbolism. We don't want to take it literalistically. The way to get at what Vidyaranya is talking about, if I can illumine it, if I can cognize it, if I can be aware of it, that's not me. Do you want something? Uh-huh. Do you know the desire? Uh-huh. So you have a subject-object relationship. And any movement of the mind or the will or the intellect is always objectively known, which is why Vidyaranya goes back to Kutastha, immovable, like a mountain, still, goes nowhere, does nothing, yet it illumines and enlivens everything. Next verse.
Atmano manasa yoge swadrishtavasat shogunaha javanteth brilliyante sushuptai drishta sanshayat. According to them, Atman and the mind combine together due to the effects of previous actions, and this combination produces the different properties. When the past karma ceases to operate as cause, the jiva goes into deep sleep and the properties too become latent.
Yes, so the idea is the self is somehow affected by the mind. And some passage of scriptures, this is why you need a teacher, will imply that the self is obscured, the self is covered, the self desires because of ignorance. And when the desires go away, then the self becomes unconscious in deep sleep. It's a confusion of the self with the subtle body, essentially. That's what it is. With equipment. Self never sleeps. Self is always there, illuminating and again, these are various schools of philosophy. We don't want to have to get too technical about it. Next verse.
Chitim matva chitte nomi. Chitim tva chetano yami. Cha ichha dvesha prayatnavan. Sya dharma dharmayo karta bhokta dukkhadimatvatah. The Atman possesses intelligence and is therefore called intelligent. It manifests intelligence in the form of desire, aversion, and effort. As a doer, it performs good and bad deeds and is, in consequence, the experiencer of pleasure and pain.
Yes, so again, the confusion of the chit with the chit chaya. He's not saying what is, he's saying what these erroneous beliefs are. So I think I am Jim. I have qualities. I do this, I do not do that. And again, we have this strange capacity of where you have consciousness has its reflection is caught in the web of the thought, which gives rise to the feeling that I'm a person. Again, favorite expression of mine, borrowed from Gaudapada, Jiva Bhavana, the feeling that I'm a person. Now, it's not just an opinion. Just like when I'm in the dream, I have the deep experience and feeling that I'm the dreamer going through those various experiences. So also, when I think I'm a person, I'm still dreaming. This is not the self. This is Chit Chaya, the reflection of consciousness. This is Aham Kriti, the various thoughts that make up the false sense of I. Next verse.
Yathatra karma vashata kadachit kam sukhadikam tatha lokantare dehe karmane chhadi janyate. In this life, subject to action, Atman sometimes experiences happiness. So too, when it takes birth in other bodies, desire, etc. arise due to karma.
Yes. So again, attributing to the self the qualities of the not self, the anta karana. So in this body, when I have punya merit, life goes sailing along well. Then I wear it out. Then desire arises for this, that, and the other thing, which impels the subtle body into another incarnation. But none of it touches the self. What he's saying here is a description of the ignorant notions. And believe me, lots and lots of Hindus confuse the self with the transmigrating soul. It's a very common misnomer. But that's not the teaching of the Upanishads. Next verse.
Evam cha sarvagasyapi sambhavetam gamagamau karma kanda samagrotra pramanam iti tevadan. They further hold that despite all its pervasiveness, Atman goes from birth to death. The whole ritual part of the Veda, Karma Kanda, they say supports them.
Yes. So in our Saturday morning group, we've talked about how the Vedas can be divided into 4 sections: the mantras, the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads. Or we can divide it into 2 sections. Everything up to the Upanishads is called the Karma Kanda, the ritual portion. And that addresses the person in ignorance who is not yet ready for the highest knowledge. So all these teachings of merit and demerit and going to various lokas, being in Swarga heaven, and then coming back to the material world, the human incarnation, has a relative reality for the subtle body. But the Jnana Kanda thunders the doctrine of ajati. What does that mean? The self is never born. I am not a person who's gone from life to life, and I am going to change into something that doesn't have to come back. That is like the person in the dream saying, oh, I don't want to be on the sailboat. I'd rather be on the car. And after that, I'd rather be on top of the mountain. And then I'd rather be in another location in the dream. Yoga says, wake up. The dream was an illusion. You were never born in the first place. One of the funniest and wonderful things Swamiji said, reincarnation is the genealogy of the ghost and the post. As long as you're believing that you are a person, the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas can be useful. That's not the highest teaching. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Anandam ayakoshoya sushuptau parishishyate aspashta chitsa atmesham.
Spashta or asparshta?
Aspashta. Aspashta chitsa atmesham purvakosho te gunaha. The first of the sheets, the bliss sheet, which persists in the state of deep sleep and which does not manifest consciousness fully, is taken as Atman by the followers of Prabhakara and some logicians.
So this is
one more sentence. What they state to be the nature of the self is in fact characteristic of the bliss sheet.
yes. So they think the self is that potentiality of everything, pure vasana, deep sleep, the avyakta, the unmanifest. But the Vedantin says that cannot be the self because it is an object of cognition. You can know that you do not know. So he's going to refute that school. Going on.
Gudham chaitanyamutprekshya jadabodha swarupatam atmano bhruvate bhatti atmano bhuvate bhatta chidutpreksho tasmritah. The followers of Bhatta hold that consciousness is hidden in Atman and that its nature is both consciousness and unconsciousness. This is inferred from the fact of the remembrance of sound sleep by the awakened man.
So here he infers that, in fact, unconsciousness is a nature of the self as well as waking. Those are forms. The self can be unconscious, it can be consciousness. But that's refuted by the Vedantins. We've covered that many times. I don't think we need to break that down. Going on.
Jado bhutva tada swapsa iti jadya smritistada vina jadyanubhutimna kathanchidu papadhyate. Quote, I became unconscious and slept, end quote. Such feeling expresses the memory of that inert state which he actually experienced. But this remembrance of unconsciousness in deep sleep would not be possible unless there were at the same time a conscious element.
Yes. So again, he goes back to this notion. if awareness itself folded up into unconsciousness, how would you know? How could you remember that you slept soundly? So I am aware of the waking state. I am aware of the dream state, and that means all altered states too. And I am aware of the deep sleep state. Here's the self constantly shining. Here is the mind, waking state, dream state, deep sleep state. Watch carefully. Samadhi. Oh, golly, there's nobody there. But the self is kutastha, always there, illuminating the presence, the changes, and even the absence of the mind. Next verse. Let me stop right there. Don't worry about this deep sleep stuff. Nobody ever got enlightened in deep sleep. If you wrestle with the idea, am I conscious in deep sleep or not? Don't worry about it. Just put the whole argument on the shelf. Knowledge of your essential nature takes place in a purified mind in the waking state. That's where you want to put your attention. Any thoughts on this? All right, going on.
Drashtu, drashteralopaksha, shruta sukta, tata swayam, aprakasha prakashabhyam, atma khadyo tavadhyutah. The Bhatta say that the Shruti declares, quote, in sleep neither the seer nor seeing is absent, end quote. Therefore, the nature of Atman is both luminous and dark, like that of a firefly.
So here the person is misinterpreting the Shruti, again attributing the qualities of the mind to the self. But the self illumines the qualities of the mind. This is the same problem the Shunyavadins have. The self is nothing. There's zero. There's nothing there. I've experienced the nothingness. Self went away. I don't exist. How do you know it? I experienced it. What saw the disappearance of whatever you're calling self? I do not doubt that your ego went away. I don't doubt that the whole thing exploded and there's no person there anymore. But something illumined it, or it could not be known. That's it. Going on.
Niranshasyo bhayat matvam na katha na kathin chitta drishyate tena chitrupa evatme yaho sankhya vivekinah. The Sankhyas, who separate Purusha and Prakriti, reject the possibility of both consciousness and unconsciousness being the nature of Atman. According to them, the Atman is without parts and must be of the nature of consciousness only.
So he's now going to pull apart some of the challenges with Sankhya philosophy. So let's briefly review Sankhya philosophy. Those of us who've taken a look at Pandit Rajmani's exegesis of Patanjali will understand this. Sankhya philosophy says that you are an individual little lump of consciousness, a purusha. And that is different from matter. Matter is called prakriti. He posits there's a super purusha, a really big lump of consciousness called Ishvara. But that's not totally what Sankhya philosophy says. But the whole problem the Sankhya's say is this little lump of consciousness has gotten itself all entangled with matter. And that what you need to do is disentangle, get out of the matter. So it has, in practice, some similarities with Vedanta. But you are not an individual little lump of consciousness. The way I like to explain it, imagine I have a piece of butcher paper here. And there are 6 little pinholes in the butcher paper. And the room is dark. And something has lighted behind the paper. So from your viewpoint, you see 6 little lights. So the question is, are there 6 pen lights, one shining behind each hole? That's the Sankhya, Purusha. Or is there one flashlight, which appears as 6 from the other side because of the nature of the pinholes? Now, if these pinholes have the capacity for intelligent self-inquiry, one of them will say, oh, when I search to my source, I'm a flashlight. This one says, oh, that's funny. When I look behind my hole, I'm a flashlight too. But they are both the same light. There are not bunches of cells. One cell. Peeping through the pinhole of all the sentient beings in creation. The best I've been able to come up with as an image. Next verse.
Jadyansha prakrite rupam vikari trigunam chatat chito moga pavagartham prakriti sa pravartate. Unconsciousness is the nature of Prakriti, the primordial substance, which is ever-changing and composed of 3 modes, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. The Prakriti functions for experience and the release of the Atman.
So it implies that the existence of the Prakriti in the cosmic scheme of things is ultimately to give the Atman experience and then finally to release it. It is fundamentally inert. Matter is jada, it's inert, though it's comprised of the 3 gunas. When those 3 gunas get out of balance, manifestation takes place. This is, even though this language is used in Gita is actually, I am the Prakriti and the Purusha. Our Shanti mantra that we have for the Isha Upanishad, Purnamada goes deeply into Sarvamidam, all this is Purnam. Purnam Adaha, that which is beyond all this, is also full. All right, next one.
Asangayash chitir bandham mokshau bheda grahanvatau bandha muktivyavasthartham purveshamiva chidbhida. Though Purusha is non-contactable and pure, he is said to be subject to bondage and release because of a confusion between the natures of Prakriti and Purusha. The Sankhyas, like the earlier Nyayikas, postulate a plurality of selves and explain how different individuals have different destinies to fulfill in this life. The release of the individual Purusha is due to his knowledge of his real nature.
Yes. So this individual Purusha is entangled with Prakriti. He needs to rediscover his self nature. Then he becomes a liberated Purusha. There's some similarities with the Vedanta. But the Sankhya's posit that the Atman really gets bound. Whereas the Vedantans say, no. The Atman is never really. My problem is not the inherent state of Atman. My problem is adhyasa, superimposition. In my mind, I attribute to myself the qualities of the not self. If in the dream I crash my car, is the waker in an accident? No. It seemed like it. But upon awakening, I see the crash in the dream was a superimposition, was an imagination, a vivid dream. I, the waker in my bed, was never really touched by it. Next verse.
Chitsindhau pravritayah prakritirhi niyamakam Ishwaram bhruvate yogaah sajivebhya purashrutah. The yogis postulate the existence of Ishvara. Prakriti functions owing to the proximity of consciousness, and Ishvara is the controller of Prakriti. He is quite distinct from and superior to the jivas, says the Shruti.
Yes. So here we have the yogis, meaning the Raja yogis, I'm assuming. I'm pretty sure that's where he's going with this. So in Patanjali, the yogis say, yes, there's these individual Purushas, but there's also a super Purusha, which he calls Ishvara, who's running the universe. And just like instead of the little individual Purushas being all entangled with Prakriti, the super Purusha, Ishvara, is never entangled. Functions, makes Prakriti do its thing, but is never bound. So that's the cosmological philosophy of Sankhya's, which the Raja Yogis was in the philosophy of Patanjali. Going on.
I think I skipped one, Jim. I was going to read the previous
All
one.
right, go back.
Mahat param avyaktamiti prakriti ruchyate shruta vasangata tadvat sango Sangho Hityata Sputha. They quote the Shruti, which says that Prakriti, the undifferentiated matter, which is unmanifested, is not the same as Mahat, the differentiated matter, and that the spirit is unattached and pure.
Yes. So again, the idea is Ishvara is unattached to Prakriti. That's the philosophy of the Sankhya's. Unlike the little itty bitty Purushas, which are all entangled with Prakriti. So it's, again, more of the same ideas. Not too important, because we are not Sankhya's. Going on.
Pradhana Kshetragya Parti Gunesha iti hi Shrutihi Aranya ke Sambhramena Yantar Yamo Papaditaha. The Shruti declares that Ishvara is the Lord of Jivas and also of Prakriti. He controls the gunas too. In the Aranyaka part of the Shruti, he is respectfully called the inner controller.
Yes. So, in a sense, there is a controller. There is Ishvara. But Ishvara is not a super individual. And even though the Shruti says Ishvara controls the jivas, what it means is the potentiality for all manifestation is inherent in the infinite. And what appears as an individual you and me comes about in the same way as galaxies and trees and bugs, and lions and tigers and bears. And the controller, the ruler, even the name Ishvara means he who wills, he who intends. So Vedanta does say that there is a total vasana, which it calls Ishvara. But that is in the realm of Maya. It's not in the realm of the infinite itself. Ishvara is the result of Maya, the causal. Going on.
Atrapi kalahanyante vadina swayuktibihi vakyanya piyatha pragnyam dadharya yoda harantihi. Here too, there are many philosophers who, by their arguments, maintain different views about Ishvara. They quote suitable texts from the Shruti and interpret them according to their light.
So, who is Ishvara? What is Ishvara? Lots and lots of philosophers have their ideas. And actually, this is something that we get in modern times, especially in the Abrahamic religions, who attribute all sorts of qualities to God. Oh, God's angry with me. I was so evil and I made God sad. The one that I find most problematic for people. Here's something that I always say that's so important. If you want to know what your theology about God is, look at how you pray. That will reveal your unconscious theology. So when you pray, you go, oh God, please, please heal Aunt Mary. What does that say about your idea of God? It says your God is neurotic. Come on, beg. I love it when you beg. You don't beg, I'm not going to give you anything. Beg, I might give you a little grace. There's no such God. But many people believe in that God. Or a God who likes bargains. Oh, if you heal my mother, I promise to stop smoking. Yeah, that's pretty good because your smoking really upsets me. There's no such God. But many people think there is. And this has been going on since time immemorial. And unfortunately, this is what shakes people's faith. Because if they have a neurotic anthropomorphic God and they pray in that way, and their prayer is not answered because they are not praying aright, then they lose faith. So, let me give you the truth of prayer. Prayer does not change God. Prayer changes the one who's praying. You start there, then you learn to pray correctly. That's all I'm going to say about that. Next verse.
क्लेश कर्म विपाकैस्त दाशयैरप्यसंयुतः पुविशेषो भवेदीशो जीववत्सोऽप्यसङ्गचेत्. According to Patanjali, Ishvara is a special Purusha, free from miseries, actions, birth and death, enjoyment and suffering, and the latent impressions. Ishvara, like Jiva, is non-attached and conscious.
So here, Vidyaranya is saying the same thing I was saying a little bit earlier. The Patanjali says that Ishvara is a special super Purusha who is not afflicted like the little jivas are. Meaning, Patanjali posits that my Purusha is all entangled up with Prakriti and that's what makes it suffer. And he says, Ishvara, the super Purusha, doesn't have those problems. Going on.
Tathapi Puviseshatvat Dhatatesya Niyantrita.
Let me stop just a moment. I hope everybody knows who Patanjali is. Patanjali is the author of the Yoga Sutra, which is an entire school of thought and practice, which has many valuable things in it, but it is not Advaita Vedanta. Now, it can be interpreted from an Advaita viewpoint, but as it's come to be practiced, it is Sankhya in nature. It's dualistic. I don't know if I just made a big assumption that everybody knows who Patanjali is. All right, I'm sorry. Please, going on.
Tathapi Puvisheshatvat Dhatatesya Niyantrita Avyavasthau Bandhamakshav Apavete Veta Mihanyatha. As person with a special nature, Ishvara rules the universe. Without his rulership, there would be no one to regulate bondage and release.
So again, this is part of Patanjali's or the Sankya's philosophy. It is Ishvara who has regulated bondage and release, who gets liberated, who doesn't. Going on.
Bhishasmaditya madat sangasya paratmanah shrutam tadhyuktamapyasya kleshakarmadhya sangamat. The Shruti declares that nature functions in fear of Ishvara. He is the ruler, though unattached. The rulership is appropriately vested in Ishvara, who is not affected by sufferings, works, and so forth.
So that's pretty self-explanatory. And Prakriti doesn't really fear the Lord. This is poetry. It's kind of like a servant acts because they're afraid the master's going to punish them, either whip them or not pay them. But that's not really how nature works. This is poetry from scripture. Going on.
Jivanapya sangatvat kleshardina yathapi cha vivekagrahata klesha karmadi pragudiritam. It is a fact that the jivas too are not affected by sufferings, etc., as they too are unattached. But when they fail to comprehend their real nature, they imagine that they are affected by sufferings, works, and so forth.
Yes. So here Vidyaranya is bringing us back to the Advaita Vedanta viewpoint. The truth is, the jiva is never touched by suffering, etc. It's only through ignorance that I think untouched. What do we mean by this? So if you take on the practice of, first of all, Sakshi Bhav, step back, take on the viewpoint of the witness. Then start checking out your self-nature. I'm not the body, I'm not the prana, I'm not the feelings, I'm not the thoughts, I'm the witnessing consciousness. Then as you move through your day and things happen, something that really shakes you, see if you can remember to stop a moment, look within, and see if all that upset touched you. Oh, the physical pain got to my body. Oh, my mind is so triggered and reactive. Yes. Oh, my intellect is so confused. My ego is so crushed. Yeah. But those are all objects. You are okay. Don't believe me. You must keep looking to see whether or not it's true. My problem is not an ontological one. There's nothing wrong with my being. There's nothing wrong with myself. There never has been. My problem is in my stupid mind. Where I attribute to the self the qualities of the not self. That's the difference. The self is never entangled with Prakriti. Never. The self is always self-shining, self-luminous, self-evident. It's always pure. It's always untouched. It's always safe. All I have to do is make the decision to give up the craziness, the chintya. Which is all just dreamlike. You look on the news and there's a hurricane where some dear friends live. You're terribly worried. Oh, it says right where they are, the hurricane came and everything was destroyed. And you call your friends and you can't get through, and you call your friends and you can't get through. Oh, I bet they're dead. And finally you get through and they say, yeah, it was really terrible. Thank God we were in Chicago when it happened. Nothing happened. But I did not know it. That's my wrong. All right, one more.
नित्यज्ञानप्रयत्तेच्छा गुणानिशस्य मन्वते असङ्गस्य नियन्तृत्व युक्तम् इति तार्किकाः. The logicians deny the controlling power to Ishvara because he is detached. They invest him with the qualities of eternal knowledge, effort, and desire.
So the logicians, this is one school of thought. The closest thing we have to it today are the people who would say, okay, God set the Big Bang in motion, but he's like the clockmaker God. Stands back. Just set it in motion and it's going. No involvement, no presence in it. Some first cause in the distant past. Yoga, I wouldn't use yoga because he's using it differently. Vedanta says, actually, Genesis, creation, is now. Now. It wasn't just in the past. Humbling here now. And through Maya Shakti, the great illusory power. Now, it's an incredible world of name and form. Luminous and shining. Constantly known by me. All right, one more.
Punvisheshatva gunaireva na chanyatha satyakama satyasankalpa ityadi shruti jagaho. They say that owing to his possessing these three qualities, Ishvara is the Lord of the universe. In support, they quote the Shruti verse, quote, he has true desires and resolves, end quote.
Yes. So again, attributing to the infinite anthropomorphic qualities because of things the Shruti says. The Shruti is poetic. It is deliberately obscure and vague. It is an occult teaching in the most literal sense of the word. The truth is hidden, which is why deep Upanishadic study needs to be done with the teacher, or at least a really good commentary. Because if you just read the text, it's subject to all sorts of misinterpretations and illusions. All right, we have time for one more.
Nityajnana-dimatvesya srishtireva sada bhavet hiranyagarbha ishopi lingadehena sanputaha. Ishvara, being endowed with eternal knowledge and other cognate attributes, must be ever engaged in the creation of the world. He must therefore be Hiranyagarbha, who is endowed with a subtle body.
I'm not going to go into this. We'll do this one next week because we're getting a little bit into technical stuff. We don't have time. What number was that one?
111.
Okay, so we'll start with 111 next week. Any other thoughts? We have like a minute or so.
Jim, this is Sheila. I just have a quick question. Sorry, my throat. What does Shruti mean?
Shruti means that which is heard, literally.
Okay.
But its reference is to scripture. We have many levels of scripture in Hinduism. The highest and the most sacred Shruti are the Vedas. And the Vedas, again, have a ritual portion, Karma Kanda, and they have a knowledge portion, the Upanishads. We also have what's called Smriti, which is the next level down, which literally means that which is remembered. In that section of Smriti, we have some very special ones which are called Itihasa. Have you heard that term before?
Mm-hmm.
It means it really happened. So works like the Ramayana, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, the Puranas, these are all part of Smriti. Then we have another level of scripture, which are what we call the Prakarana works. Those are literalistically lists of categories. But what's happened is various sages have taken the ideas from the Upanishads and set them up in a systematized way, which imply practice so that you and I know what to do. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yes, it does. I think I was just curious because I took very little music class, and there's like a Shruti box that we have to use to tune up our voice to it. So every time you kept saying Shruti, I was thinking, like, what is the meaning of that? So
okay, well, let's go into that, because the Shruti in music is a single tone that's always there at the bottom, that's going on, and the raga's going here and there, and the sitar's doing this, and the singer's doing that, and the tablas are doing all this stuff, and just going, going. There's that shruti. And they use the word shruti because it's the underlying eternal tone for the music, like oh. And it's a beautiful use, but that's why they use that.
Mhm.
And you can say it's heard because you tune to it. That's what you need to listen to. Because you tune to the shruti.
And my voice is always off Shruti. So my music teacher's like, be on Shruti, you hear the Shruti. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Western music, you'd say you're singing out of tune. Yeah. So you need to know that you're in tune with the shruti, the fundamental tone of the particular piece of music. But it has great mystical meaning as well. But it literally just means that which is heard. Anything to add?
No, that's very
Okay, we'll end here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.